We'll close the debate.
Thank you very much, Speaker, and I want to thank the members opposite for their thoughtful interventions. And in relation to the member from Fall River, Waverley Beaverbank, he drew some to the attention of the House a little problem that arose in the South Shore during the school board election, and that was something that was considered by the group making these recommendations, and hopefully that experience, as regretful as it was and regrettable as it was, will never occur again. And I think some of the changes to the Municipal Elections Act reflect that unfortunate situation. So, Mr. Speaker, these changes, the issue of electronic voting was the one that seemed to capture pretty well everybody's imagination. Certainly that was the media question the day that we did the bill briefing, and I noticed that the members who made their comments did talk about that. Clearly, there are lessons to be learned from other jurisdictions, but it is something that will come. To the member from Halifax, Clayton Park was talking about updating the Provincial Elections Act, and I did comment that in my when I was making remarks in the bill briefing that I expected there will be corresponding changes the next time our Provincial Election Act is reviewed. So I think the things she was making the point about electronic petitions, there was a committee on assembly matters and things like that. I'm sure that type of information and those concerns will be taking place in the future. Mr. Speaker, I'm now pleased to take my place and see this bill move on to law amendments.
The motion is for second reading of Bill number 43. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary-minded? Motion is carried.
Bill 43, entitled An Act to amend Chapter 300 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Municipal Elections Act.
Order that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable the Government House Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call Bill number 45, the Companies Act?
Bill number 45, the Companies Act. The Honourable the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Good afternoon, and Mr. Speaker, and it is with pleasure that I stand once again this afternoon before the members of the House to bring forward amendments to a bill which is under the Department of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations. This time it is amendments to the Companies Act. I want to begin by saying that amendments to this legislation will reduce the paperwork associated with businesses on an annual basis by about 30,000 hours. Not only the time, but the dollar saving with that reduction in paperwork would be significant for businesses in this province, Mr. Speaker. The changes will simplify procedures for Nova Scotia companies without losing any of the protections for creditors and minority shareholders. And these changes have been developed by staff of my department in full consultation with and with the able and generous assistance of experts in Nova Scotia company law. The changes, Mr. Speaker, follow from many months of consultation with lawyers practicing in the field of corporate law. And in some respects, they follow practice in other provinces, and in part, they represent appropriate modifications to reflect Nova Scotia's unique situations. The Companies Act in Nova Scotia has had significant competitive advantages over other jurisdictions in some fields, particularly respecting unlimited liability companies, and these are very valuable under U.S. tax laws. However, Mr. Speaker, other jurisdictions are moving to acquire this business with similar processes. Alberta and British Columbia now allow for the formation of unlimited companies. So several of the proposed changes are intended to help Nova Scotia maintain its competitive advantage. The proposed amendments are designed to simplify a number of procedures, and they should help Nova Scotia retain its advantage as the jurisdiction for choice for companies who can wish to continue to use our unlimited liability status. Mr. Speaker, most of the changes proposed are highly technical and for that reason of particular interest to specialists rather than to the public at large or to the members of this House. So rather than detail each change, I'm going to briefly note their main effect. The changes contained in the bill include 1. Adding a simpler amalgamation process. 2. Allowing simple conversion to an unlimited liability company. 3. Allowing capital reduction by special resolution. 4. Allowing companies that have been struck off the register to be reinstated on application to the registrar as opposed to the courts. 5. Permitting companies to financially assist persons willing to buy shares in the company. 6. Providing for changes in capital more simply. 7. Removing the need for a confirmatory meeting for special resolutions. 8. Reducing required majority for special resolution from 3/4 to 2/3, which is in line with many other provinces. Mr. Speaker, these changes will improve the ability of companies to carry out reasonable business decisions with simpler and less expensive procedures. The intervention of the courts will be required less, and protections for creditors and minority shareholders will continue to be in place. Mr. Speaker, the changes to the Companies Act contribute to the province's goal of reducing the paperwork burden faced by businesses, and we're doing that through our Better Regulation initiative. These changes are a strong forward step in reducing red tape requirements and improving Nova Scotia's reputation as a very good place in which to do business. Mr. Speaker, following those few comments, I will now move second reading of Bill number 45, the Companies Act.
The Honourable the Member for Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My comments will be brief. I just wanted to offer a few on Bill number 45, amending the Companies Act. Just want to reiterate, I guess, or iterate today that this is not a new bill. This bill is a reintroduction of a bill that this government allowed to fall short die on the order paper last year following the Premier's decision to end the session. And it's a shame, really, that it died last year, because no doubt there are many businesses out there who have faced the challenges, as noted by the Minister, throughout this last year that really could have been avoided. And often these kinds of burdens and challenges are what will make or break many of these small businesses in particular. The government claims that about 30,000 hours of paperwork per year will be reduced by simplifying procedures for registering Nova Scotian companies, while at the same time protecting creditors and minority stakeholders. And as a former small business owner, this is I certainly can agree with that. I'm pleased to hear that the reduction of red tape is very much a challenge for many, and I could speak firsthand to that. The amendments contribute to the province's goal of reducing the paperwork burden faced by businesses through the Better Regulations initiative. These amendments, Mr. Speaker, were developed as a result of multi-year consultations with corporate law specialists and department officials. Our caucus was visited last spring when this bill was first brought forward by the government, and in its previous incarnation it was known as Bill 192. And as we did then, Mr. Speaker, the NDP support this bill in moving forward to law amendments. Thank you.
The Honourable the Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and it's a pleasure for me to address some of the changes that are proposed here for the Companies Act. Again, these are changes that have been proposed and come forward in close consultation with the legal community, and I think that we need to acknowledge their input, that many hours were spent with the members of the bar asking for their input and how the current law could be improved to streamline and make our legal firms more competitive in the work they do on behalf of their clients. And I know that the members of the legal community are very anxious to see this pass. They have, as I believe, done their homework in terms of working closely with government and keeping the opposition parties well informed about the need for these changes. And I very much appreciate the time that they've spent in doing that, not only on their own behalf, but with the interest of keeping our province competitive and allowing us to continue to thrive in certain industries and business. One of the things mentioned was the unique aspect that we had enjoyed, which was for the registering of unlimited companies here in the province. And that was something that was a great source of business and income to our law firms, as we were at one time the only province that was doing that work for many American companies that wanted to have a presence in Canada. And Nova Scotia's Act allowed that to happen with the greatest, efficiency. What we did do in the 2004 budget, though, Mr. Speaker, was that the government greatly increased the fees for registering an unlimited company. And that was the first blow to our competitiveness in that area. That increase in fees was exponential and came at a time when other provinces were looking at getting involved and allowing this same activity to take place in their provinces. And the minister has mentioned today that both British Columbia and Alberta allow this same registering of unlimited companies that we had previously been the only place in Canada to go to. So
Order. The chatter is getting a little high. Thank.
Speaker, I appreciate that. I feel that the beginning of the competitiveness being lost came with the increase in fees that certainly put a damper on that business for the legal community. Again, though, it's important that our act remain more modern. It's a fairly old act from dating back really from the early 1900s. And it was time to make a lot of changes that the large legal community that we have in the province could very clearly see which changes were needed to streamline and make the processes more efficient. At the same time, while we're doing that, I feel that it's really important that we continue the protection that existed previously for creditors and for minority shareholders. I was happy to hear the minister mention both of those stakeholders in this process, because we don't want to see anybody left with less protection or certainty of protecting their assets as we go forward. And certainly when you're registering and dealing with the assets of companies, that is an important consideration. There was a discussion paper that was developed around this consultation process, and I understand that it was circulated throughout the legal community for their advice and their input. And that certainly is a model for this government or any other government to follow in making these kinds of substantial changes. Alleviating the burden of an awful lot of paperwork for these firms will not only save time and save a lot of money, it will also be passed back to the companies themselves. So the legal firms will be able to do the work more efficiently, and in turn the companies they represent will be able to achieve their aims in a more efficient and a more less costly manner. And I think that that's important as well. Maintaining our competitiveness is a key theme for all of the measures that we look at in the Liberal Party as we consider bills coming forward. We believe that it's most important that we keep competitive advantages for our businesses and do whatever is possible really to enhance the advantages we have naturally. And when we have such an active and really well-developed legal community. We have a lot of major firms and have head offices of major legal firms here in this province, and it is one of the sectors that is very, very strong and influential in our province. And I think it's important that we work with them to ensure that both the controls and checks and balances are in place, Mr. Speaker, but also that we are modernizing and streamlining our methods of doing business so that we keep in touch with with the best systems that are available, and that we not allow ourselves to become out of date or antiquated. And I think the government has responded to those pleas and has done what it can to keep that competitive advantage, which was somewhat diminished by the high fees that were introduced. And I know that's been noted by others. However, it's important to say that is something that government should be aware of. Perhaps those fees could be changed again to give us a little bit of an advantage. However, in the meantime, I still know it is a good source of business for our legal firms, and we want to continue to see that happen. Mr. Speaker, I look forward to this bill going forward. I'm sure we'll hear from the legal community or their representatives that they are pleased with these changes. And, again, I think that our competition, our ability to compete even in a global market is very important to our province, and I look forward to other methods and other bills that will help us remove barriers to doing business in Nova Scotia. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
If I recognize the Minister of Service Nova Scotia, it will be to close the debate. The Honourable, the Minister of Service Nova Scotia.
Thank you, Speaker, and again, I would like to thank those on the in the benches, the opposition, for their helpful comments. This bill is a very technical one, and to be quite frank, it's best understood by lawyers. But I want to assure the members of the House, the legal people who deal with this say that it is most of the changes are ones going to make it considerably better for these unlimited liability companies to come to Nova Scotia and do business. So we were, as the member from Halifax Clayton Park say, we were losing some of our competitive advantage because there were other jurisdictions getting into the business. We did have I won't say a monopoly, but we certainly had the bulk of the business in Canada, and we want to retain that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I look forward to the bill moving to law amendments.
The motion is for the second reading of Bill number 45. Is the host ready for the question? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried.
Bill 45, entitled An Act to amend Chapter 81 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Companies Act.
Order that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable the Government Deputy Host Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call Bill number 49, the Civil Service Collective Bargaining Act?
Bill number 49, the Civil Service Collective Bargaining Act. The Honourable the Minister of Human Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to move second reading of Bill number 49. Mr. Speaker, the amendments to the Civil Service Collective Bargaining Act introduced by this government will have a positive impact on those who come to work for the government on a seasonal and casual basis. Many of the seasonal workers provide care and protection for our forests, parks, wildlife, and environment. They work in all corners of this province. Among them are enforcement officers, forest firefighters, and parks workers. Still other seasonal workers are frontline contributors to Nova Scotia's billion-dollar tourism, culture, and heritage industry. On a seasonal basis, we need interpreters in museums, travel counselors in visitor information centers, and site caretakers, just to mention a few. Mr. Speaker, our amendments not only affect those who come to work for the tourism season. Another group of employees, casual workers, are hired throughout our government to assist in the delivery of important programs and services across this province. They are critical to our workforce and to our province, and I'm here today to talk about a bill that will improve the quality of the terms of employment. Earlier this year, in March 2007, I met with a group of seasonal workers who talked to me about the employment history with government. Many of them have come back each season for many, many years. I appreciated their candor and was impressed by their loyalty, both to their work and to their communities. At that time, I made a commitment to have the Public Service Commission look into this matter. Not long after the June 2007 Supreme Court of Canada decision on collective bargaining rights was announced. Following that decision, we felt it was prudent to review how seasonal and casual workers are addressed under the current legislation. It was clear that we needed to make change, and in this fall, we worked with the union representing the civil service, the NSGEU, to discuss how the legislation could address the needs of the workers I had met with in the spring and better align with the Supreme Court decision. We focused on bargaining unit level work and found that through a collaborative approach with the union, we reached mutual agreement on many fronts. We agreed to bring forward legislative changes that see seasonal and casual workers who do bargaining level work become civil service employees under the Civil Service Collective Bargaining Act after working more than 10 weeks of employment. This is much sooner than the current legislation allows, which is 6 months for seasonal workers and 12 months for casual workers. If passed, the amended legislation would mean that after working more than 10 weeks, these employees will become part of the bargaining unit, able to be represented by the NSGEU. They will receive bargaining unit wages, and after a certain length of employment, they will become eligible for many employee benefits, like health and dental coverage, sick leave and vacation pay. These details have been negotiated with the union. Mr. Speaker, this is a significant change in how we employ seasonal and casual workers. It will take time to identify each person and their current status in order to best bring them into the civil service. We are committed to train managers and human resource professionals as soon as we have the legislative mandate to do so. Much of the work currently underway will help us calculate the financial impact of the change. However, I believe that this investment is the right thing to do. Mr. Speaker, this legislative change will improve the working circumstances of hundreds of people who have worked with government for many years, many in rural Nova Scotia, and for those who come to work with us in the future. In our effort to become a preferred employee, we believe this bill is in line with the Supreme Court of Canada's decision and is in the best interest of Nova Scotians and the civil service. Mr. Speaker, with that, I move second reading of Bill number 49.
The Honourable the Member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I too rise on occasion today to speak on Bill number 49, amendments introduced for the Civil Service Collective Bargaining Unit. Mr. Speaker, let's be perfectly honest here today and understand that this legislation is coming forward from a decision from the Supreme Court of Canada in June concerning a British Columbia case. In March, I guess, the minister is saying, I say June of 2007, the Supreme Court decision. So, and this is legislation that's long overdue. If this government was proactive, it would have been done a long time ago. But, Mr. Speaker, it's getting done now. That's the most important thing. And realize that the working relationship that the NSGEU has worked very hard, their union members and specifically Joan Jessam and Linda Power and Ian Johnson and those fellows working hard to finally get this bill forward. And this is a bill about seasonal workers, casual workers who do bargaining level work in the civil service. Under the Act, I mean, more than 10 weeks they'll be eligible to become a member, and I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing that there's in this here that there's actually a date in there that this bill will become effective on February the 1st with the implementation at a later date. I think that's good. I think that's a positive step, eh? But you have to realize that these were seasonal, casual employees that worked for government for many years, and they're well deserving of this legislation, Mr. Speaker. I remember here in this legislature in last March or so, when all these casual and seasonal workers were hearing the legislation to bring their concerns forward to the minister, and I too am glad that this is going forward. But I also like to congratulate the union, the government, on a very proactive piece of legislation for casual workers. And Mr. Speaker, the hard work, and no, I'm sorry I can't at this time. But that's and all this bill is in the best interest of the province of Nova Scotia and the casual and seasonal workers. So I too am looking forward on this bill going for second reading and the law amendments. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable the Member for Kings West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I am pleased that this bill has come before the legislature. It's one that I became introduced to through casual and seasonal employees with the Department of Natural Resources in my area. In fact, it was probably the second year that I was in office I had a delegation that came to my office to talk about the concerns that they had regarding their benefits, their compensation, and how they were viewed as government workers. So this bill, the Civil Service Collective Bargaining Act, which will now embrace seasonal and casual workers, is a very, very positive development. And yes, while it did have a great deal of its impetus from BC, where the Supreme Court made a decision that these workers did belong inside the collective bargaining process. But one of the things that was really brought to my attention through the Department of Natural Resources was the fact that the value and the nature of the work carried out by these employees. And many of them are frontline workers during our summer months, the firefighters, those who man the towers to look out for fires in our primary industry of forestry, and those that work the helicopter operations as assistants. All of these workers are highly skilled, highly trained, have a great deal of professional development behind them. And the thing that became very, very clear to me as I met with the Minister of Natural Resources on this issue was that, yes, they were highly regarded, but they really weren't being compensated to the degree that they should be. And the tendency for some of these workers to be captured by other companies that could use their skills and employ them 12 months of the year. These are very, very dedicated employees who love their jobs and didn't want to leave either tourism or natural resources, but many of them were starting down that road. And so it is important that this piece of legislation will hold on to workers who have 10, 20, 30 years of professional work in their backgrounds. So I'm very, very pleased to see that this bill now will be moving on to second reading and law amendments. And I do want to also reflect for just a moment on one of the things the minister brought forward, and that is many of these jobs are in rural Nova Scotia, a part of the province where we can't afford to lose, our jobs and our residents from these small communities. So those who look after our parks, our streams, our forests, game sanctuaries, wilderness trails, these are very, very valuable positions. And I know that this is going to turn the tide for many of these workers to make a renewed commitment, and also I think it'll be easier to attract workers into these seasonal jobs as a result of the opportunity to gain dental, medical, disability, and pension benefits as they move along in their careers. So I just want to say that this is a good piece of legislation. It'll be interesting to see how the workers themselves, react to this, and whether or not how quickly benefits will indeed come their way. And with those few remarks, I will take my place, Mr. Speaker.
If I recognize the Honourable the Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just very briefly, I want to thank the Minister of Human Resources and the Public Service Commission for her role in bringing this forward today. I was approached by many of the seasonal workers within the Department of Natural Resources. I very much value their services, and as the member from Kings West has just pointed out, this is a way of making sure that we not only can retain them, but we can recruit new ones, and they're a very important part of our department. And I appreciate that she has brought this amendment forward today.
If I recognize the Honourable the Minister of Human Resources, it will be to end debate. The Honourable the Minister of Human Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my honourable colleagues in the opposition for their comments on this bill, and yes, I am looking forward to this passing, and with that I move second reading of Bill number 49.
The motion is for second reading of Bill number 49. Is the host ready for the question? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary-minded? Motion is carried.
Bill 49, title and act to amend Chapter 71 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Civil Service Collective Bargaining Act.
Ordered that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This concludes the government business for today. And would you please call on the opposition Liberal House Leader?
The Honourable the Opposition Leader, Government House Leader.
Whatever. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, tomorrow the House will sit from the hours of 2 p.m. until 6 p.m. and we will be calling a resolution that was presented today in the House, and both House leaders have been made aware of the resolution. It's on domestic violence, and also Bill number 35, the Education Act, tuition support. I move that we do now adjourn to meet again tomorrow at 2 p.m.
It has been moved that we adjourn and meet tomorrow at 2 p.m. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. Order, please. We have now reached the moment of interruption. As I indicated earlier today, there was a draw for the debate on the adjournment motion. The draw was won by the Honourable Member for Richmond, who wishes to debate the matter. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia government immediately address widespread emergency room closures occurring in several hospitals throughout our province. The Honourable the Member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure to stand and debate the resolution which was put forward by the member for Richmond concerning the widespread emergency room closures across this province. The member for Richmond knows full well about emergency room closures, having undergone a large, in his own riding, Mr. Speaker, at the Strait Regional Hospital, having undergone a large amount of emergency room closures. Order, there please. As well, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable the Member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, this is probably one of the most important debates that we could have at this time in this province, because of the fact that I wish I was standing here for the first time bringing this to the attention of the House, but it's not. It's been a very, very long time since this has been going on in this province, and it is a problem which is growing as each day goes by in Nova Scotia. To the date December 4th, Mr. Speaker, as of December 4th, which of course, as you know, is today, emergency rooms in this province have been closed for 5,920.5 hours. Mr. Speaker, if you compare that to last year at the same time, at that time, the closures were totaling 3,497 hours, Mr. Speaker. Let me give you some examples. In Digby, the emergency room there has been closed for over 1,400 hours this year. In North Cumberland, 620 hours. The Lillian Fraser Hospital, 435 hours. In Cape Breton District Health Authority, the closures there have amounted to 2,818.5 hours. That accounts for almost half of all the closures in Nova Scotia. In Glace Bay, 818 hours. On the north side, 894.5. And in New Waterford, over 1,100 hours that the hospitals have closed. Mr. Speaker, when asked about this on a frequent basis, the Minister of Health brags that there's a 98% open rate for ERs in this province. Mr. Speaker, that isn't good enough. That isn't good enough for this province. This government, by saying that, has not admitted that there is a problem in keeping ERs open. The throne speech address itself, the throne speech address, I'm sure the Minister of Health will get his time during this debate, and I'd love to hear it, but the throne speech debate addresses wait times and simply says that the government is working on keeping ERs open across the province. And it brags about new ERs facilities at the QE2, about the $17 million there, and that this will help reduce the wait time for emergency room service at that facility. But what about the facilities that cannot even open? What about the facilities where you're not sure if they're going to be open from one day to the next? What about those facilities, Mr. Speaker? We have maintained and we have kept an ER closure calendar the last couple of years, Mr. Speaker. It's available online on our website, and I'll table it here. I'm going to refer to it in just a minute, but I'll table it here. If you look, Mr. Speaker, and flip through this, we've marked in a highlighted area the number of days that it's been closed. If you look through to June and July, don't get sick in this province during July and August, because the ERs in some facilities, in Glace Bay, in some communities, in New Waterford, the Northside General, the ERs aren't closed just occasionally. The ERs are closed almost on a daily basis, Mr. Speaker. You can look to, for instance, our member from Digby, who has put up some good ideas about the ER closures there in Digby at the Digby General, and doctors who are interested in covering shifts at the Digby General. That finally did get something done then. But you know, all of the things that we're attempting to do are just small bites out of a huge problem. But nothing is really working. You have to focus on the problem with ERs, which the government has turned, instead of focusing on those problems with emergency rooms, and instead of focusing on problems in other aspects of health care in this province, the government has decided to turn its fury on health care providers and pick a fight with them over the right to strike, to distract everybody from the real problems, Mr. Speaker. What we need to be doing in this province is attracting and recruiting doctors and nurses and lab technicians. We don't need to be picking a fight with them. We need to be attracting them to this province so they can help solve some of our problems. Mr. Speaker, we in the Liberal caucus have suggested time and time again that there are several possible solutions. This is not done just to bash the government. There are solutions. Educate and train more ER doctors. Open more seats at medical schools. Possible payment of tuition in return for service contracts, Mr. Speaker. Recruit doctors from other countries. There's an abundance of doctors who are graduating from the United Kingdom. Recognize their credentials, Mr. Speaker. Fast-track their licensing if we have to. We introduced a bill to that effect, and we're going to reintroduce it as well. There's no reason, Mr. Speaker, there is no reason why doctors from the United Kingdom need to be babysat for some 200 hours in the ER before receiving their practicing privileges. They could be keeping our ERs open, Mr. Speaker. We could be creating province-wide locum programs, Mr. Speaker. There was a group of ER doctors proposed that program 2 years ago, and they were turned down. The doctors want to work. They're willing to put in an extra effort to help out where they're needed. They just need to know exactly what's going on. Let me give you an example. Musquodoboit Valley Hospital, ER, was closed for 11 days this summer, and at least 2 emergency room doctors from the city were willing to go and keep that ER open, but they were not aware of the closure until after it happened. Mr. Speaker, I'm suggesting possible solutions, the use of nurse practitioners and paramedics. That was put forward in Digby General, and for Digby and Digby General was a pilot project to determine the feasibility there, Mr. Speaker. So as I've mentioned, this is not something that has just come about. This is a problem that we've made the government aware of time after time after time. Health minister after health minister after health minister. We've told them that there's a problem. We kept track of the problem for the last couple of years, that this problem is building. What are we going to do about emergency room closures, Mr. Speaker? And instead, again, as I mentioned, what we get is a government that, instead of turning its attention to the real problem, decided to hide its head in the sand. You can't deal with a problem, Mr. Speaker, until you admit that there is a problem. If you're not willing to admit there's a problem and a crisis, not a problem, a crisis in emergency room care in this province, Mr. Speaker, you cannot deflect. You cannot say, well, look what we're doing in Halifax by building a new $17 million facility. Isn't that great for the rest of the province? It certainly is. Is that great for the emergency room in Glace Bay that's closed on a Saturday night and you have to go there, Mr. Speaker? No, it's not great. Is that great for the emergency room that you go to should it happen to be open and you wait for 6, 9, 10 hours to take your sick child in and get them treated because you can't take them anywhere else because they don't have a family doctor to go to in this province? Those are real problems. The minister admits that those are real problems. And what we're proposing, no, well, the minister has never admitted. The only person on that side of the government who admitted there's a health care crisis was the Premier, and he's no longer there. That was John Hamm, the former Premier, I'm saying. The current Premier won't admit anything. He doesn't even talk about ER closures. I don't even know if he cares about ER closures. But all I can say is that, Mr. Speaker, this is a crisis that we are not on top of in this province. It's a crisis that we've tried to warn the government about, that it was coming. It's a crisis that we have proposed as a responsible opposition party. It is a crisis that we have proposed solutions to, Mr. Speaker. And we have told them that these are some of the things that we should be doing in this province. Now, Mr. Speaker, what I'd like to hear the minister do right now is stand up and say, some of those solutions we're going to act on right away, and we're going to fast-track this, and we're going to take care of this crisis right now because it can no longer occur in this province. Mr. Speaker, when someone in this province, when any Nova Scotian goes to an emergency room in any community, that emergency room should be open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There is no other excuse, there is no reason that the minister can put forward why they are not. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I would thank you for your time and I will take my seat.
The Honourable, the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and very pleased to stand tonight and speak to temporary emergency room closures in some of Nova Scotia's 37 emergency rooms. Mr. Speaker, there are 37 emergency rooms in this province. First, I'd like to assure Nova Scotians and the members opposite, as was alluded to by the member from Glace Bay, that Nova Scotia's ERs are open 98% of the time. 98% of the time. Fear-mongering and manipulation of the facts do not serve Nova Scotians, nor do they help find solutions. He can stand there and yell all he wants, but I can tell you, it doesn't help us find solutions. And when we can sit there and find solutions, there are some challenges in ERs. There are challenges in ERs. And I'd be the first person to admit of the problems that we are having with the ERs. The member opposite says that I didn't admit to it. Mr. Speaker, I can say a number of times in questions in this House that I have admitted there is a problem with the emergency rooms in certain parts of this province. Mr. Speaker, we are committed to our province and its people. And we are determined to find those solutions to keep emergency rooms across the province open full-time, 100%. That's why working hand-in-hand with communities, working hand-in-hand with district health authorities, healthcare professionals, that my government, our government, continues to take action. We are tackling these challenges head-on, and we are doing so in a number of ways. Nova Scotia enjoys some of the best health human resource recruitment and retention numbers in the entire country. We have more physicians per 100,000 population than anywhere else in Canada. More Nova Scotians have a family physician than people in any other province. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that the number of doctors that we have are increasing. Since January alone, we've attracted 58 new doctors. And that's also good news that we're replacing many of those doctors that relocate and are gaining more. Even when you consider these numbers, we still have gained 34 new physicians since January in the outflow and inflow of physicians. 16 of those physicians are practicing in rural areas of our province. In addition, 4 new CAP, or international students, graduate graduates will start practicing in rural communities in the next 60 days. All told, since 2005, 23 international medical graduates have been mentored under CAP and are now working at full scope of their practice in our province. Mr. Speaker, we have supported the districts in their efforts to recruit more doctors, and they have experienced some phenomenal successes. The member from Glace Bay underlined Digby, and Digby has faced some difficult challenges in the last year, but I'm very pleased to say that we'll be able to offer 24/7 ER coverage early in the new year. We've also supported innovative models of care in Digby. This has led to plans to hire 2 new nurse practitioners for the area. So I don't know whose idea it was. If it was the member opposite's idea to hire new nurse practitioners, well, then I'll thank him for it. But we are doing it. This government is making the difference in those districts. There are areas that are also enjoying success. Pictou has recruited 7 new doctors. New Waterford has also been successful. There is now a nurse practitioner in the community, and more family doctors are on the way. The district has also organized a clinic for any patients in the need of a family doctor. Now, Mr. Speaker, over 500 new nurses have relocated to Nova Scotia in the last 5 years. 86% of our nursing program graduates are employed here. And of those grads, 83% have full-time jobs. Nationally, only 43% of nurses have full-time employment, which we feel is a shame. So we're doubling that. By December, Nova Scotia will graduate 300 new nurses. 200 of them have been offered jobs here, and right now more districts are continuing to make offers. So I hope that number to be much higher. Mr. Speaker, there are tremendous achievements that create healthcare advantages for Nova Scotians. But we're not content just to rest on that. Today, competition for healthcare providers is intense. Most jurisdictions in Canada, North America, and beyond are facing the very same challenges. Manitoba, Alberta, Quebec, Ontario, BC are all looking for solutions to their health human resources challenges. And that's why we must continue to work aggressively to make Nova Scotia the destination of choice for all healthcare providers. And we know that the number one factor that healthcare providers consider when deciding where to practice is lifestyle, Mr. Speaker, and Nova Scotia has what they want in spades. It is not enough to rely on our natural advantages. We are creating the conditions needed to appeal to healthcare work providers, and moreover, we are letting them know about it. We are improving Nova Scotia's healthcare technology and infrastructure, and our government has invested $90 million from the Federal Medical Equipment Fund on new medical equipment. We've added 6 new MRIs. We've added a PET scanner, state-of-the-art 64-slice CAT scanners in most hospitals, and 12 lead defibrillators on all ambulances within our ambulance system across the province. We are incorporating information technology systems like PACS, telehealth, electronic health record system, and these advances will help improve efficiency and patient care. Now, Mr. Speaker, we've made some tremendous investments in the last number of weeks. The Colchester Regional and Lillian Fraser Hospital are being replaced and improved. Mr. Speaker, the Colchester Regional will be a brand new state-of-the-art $155 million hospital. The ER at the QE2 Regional Hospital is being expanded through a $17 million renovation project, which will create more space, more clinical space, more capability of having different professionals working in the ER to make sure that patient flow continues to move forward. We are ensuring that our healthcare professionals are competitively compensated. Our physicians are already doing well compared to doctors across the country. We are also leading the country in unique ways to compensate them for the invaluable work that they do. In fact, Nova Scotia has the highest percentage of alternative payment plans among all provinces. And we're working with educators and trainers to increase the number of healthcare providers that we are graduating. And this year, we added 8 residency positions at Dalhousie. All of them have return for service agreements. We've introduced the Rural Nursing Program to prepare more nurses for careers in Nova Scotia's rural communities. We've developed and launched a new website and new marketing materials to help let healthcare providers everywhere know that Nova Scotia has a great deal to offer. And recently, we took part in an Opportunity Nova Scotia hiring fairs in 5 major cities in Ontario and Alberta. The reasons that an ER may temporarily close are complex and multifaceted. The public should not be fooled by those who oversimplify that challenge. All are those that advise that we simply must find more doctors or we must pay them more. Compensation must be fair and competitive, and it must be critical that it is sustainable. Likewise, although human resources play a role, the solution does not only lie in recruiting more doctors and nurses. Other factors like scheduling, vacations, distribution of resources, models of care, changing expectations, and lifestyle also comes into play. Times have changed, and so have the expectations of healthcare professionals. New graduates are attracted to larger centers, and the face of medicine is changing. Often new young doctors are interested in starting a family, and adding ER work to an office practice in the community is not always conducive to a family lifestyle. The way we operate Nova Scotia's emergency rooms must keep pace with the changing need of Nova Scotians and the changing expectations of our highly valued doctors and nurses. Today, Nova Scotia has 37 emergency rooms, as I mentioned, in communities big and small across the province. They offer 24-hour coverage 98% of the time. Our neighboring provinces have far fewer ERs and are permanently closing more. We're not going to go down that road. We continue to support our districts in their efforts to staff emergency rooms right across the province. In fact, we have expanded access to emergency care. In 2005, 9 rural hospitals began receiving additional funding to keep their ERs open 24 hours a day. We continue to look for and find effective solutions to keep our ERs open and ensure that all Nova Scotians have access to the care that they need and they deserve. Mr. Speaker, our government is deeply committed to the health and well-being of our province and all of its people. Thank you very much.
The Honourable, the member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I usually start any debate with saying how such a pleasure it is to rise and speak on an issue, Mr. Speaker, but not this issue. Because we all know here we are in late debate at the end of the daily routine, discussing a matter which I think is probably one of the most important matters we should be discussing when we talk about health care here in Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. Later on in this week, we'll be discussing what I think the priorities of the government is around the anti-strike legislation, Mr. Speaker. And I think this debate should be taking place during the daily routines, Mr. Speaker, during debate that we get the full attention of all members of this House, Mr. Speaker, and give the attention that it deserves, Mr. Speaker. We've talked many times over the last several years, Mr. Speaker, and this government, I have to be very clear, Mr. Speaker, have been in power for 8 years, and we've seen wait times increase, Mr. Speaker. We've seen an increase in ER closures throughout this province, Mr. Speaker. And to see a throne speech that says they're going to start looking at this, Mr. Speaker, really doesn't hold a whole lot of weight in my mind, Mr. Speaker, and I think of that of many Nova Scotians. We know, Mr. Speaker, Lillian Fraser Memorial Hospital in Tatamagouche closed its emergency room for the 22nd time last week, Mr. Speaker. 3 ERs in Cape Breton closed for a total of 7 times in November. Pugwash emergency room closed 7 times in October, Mr. Speaker. Digby's ER closed twice in November. Shelburne's Roseway Hospital closed last week, Mr. Speaker, and New Waterford Hospital closes on a regular basis, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Health has said that ER closures happen time to time. But, Mr. Speaker, when they do happen, it's a matter of life and death, Mr. Speaker. We're not going to sugarcoat what happens when an emergency room is closed, Mr. Speaker. I know, and I don't know if the government realizes the impact that emergency room closure has on not only the community, but an individual and their families in the time of need, Mr. Speaker. I know, as a paramedic, that time is of the essence when it comes to a medical emergency, Mr. Speaker. And I know that when you have some medical emergencies like a heart attack, Mr. Speaker, that you can't wait an extra 45 minutes to go to the next town, Mr. Speaker, to go to the next ER that's open down the road, Mr. Speaker. One of the stories I heard was from a gentleman, Mr. Speaker, this summer when I attended the Digby rally around their concerns on health care and the emergency room closure, was a gentleman who was suffering a heart attack, Mr. Speaker, showed up at the doorsteps of the Digby emergency room and it was closed. Can you imagine what he was going through, what his family was going through when they realized the help that they needed wasn't there? There was a closed sign, Mr. Speaker, on the emergency room. So what this gentleman had to do, he had to rely on the professional emergency health services that we have here, Mr. Speaker, the ambulance service that we have that the minister mentions many times, that's the best in Canada, and I believe myself the best in North America. But what that does to that system, Mr. Speaker, when an emergency room closes, puts a strain on the emergency services that we see here in the province, Mr. Speaker. I've talked about it in the past, what the paramedic role is when an emergency room closes, Mr. Speaker. We rely, or the government today relies on the ambulance service to provide care for a community when an emergency room closes. That puts an added pressure on not only the paramedics, but the staffing level that emergency medical care has to hopefully staff those additional emergency rooms, or emergency vehicles, Mr. Speaker. The district health authorities, it adds a pressure to them because now, with the agreement that we have, wherever that emergency room closes, Mr. Speaker, that health authority will pay for the ambulance service, Mr. Speaker, that needs to be put on duty because of a closure. And as I mentioned, transportation to a hospital is most important, especially in a medical emergency or critical ill patient, Mr. Speaker. The most important place where these individuals need to arrive at is a tertiary care hospital, which is the QE2 here in Halifax. And with the minister's statement of that we have the best ambulance service in the country and that they're there to provide that service when the ER closes is great. But that puts a strain on that service itself, Mr. Speaker. If that's the approach this government's going to take, then we need to see something from the Minister of Health that's going to go towards improving our ambulance service and ensuring that transportation that I talked about occurs in a timely manner. Everybody should be aware of the golden hour, Mr. Speaker. There's a golden hour for a reason. Anybody who's critically ill or has an injury has about an hour to receive the critical care that they need in an emergency room or an OR, Mr. Speaker. They have 1 hour. And like the example I used a few minutes ago, this gentleman who was having a heart attack had to go from Digby, arrived at the emergency room in Digby, had to call an ambulance, and those paramedics took that gentleman to Middleton Hospital, Mr. Speaker. I think it was about a 45-minute time travel for that call, Mr. Speaker. So if the government's going to rely on the paramedics of this province, the men and women who are ready at any time to provide emergency services, then he should be coming forward with enhancing that program, Mr. Speaker. We have one air ambulance here in the province. We have one helicopter, Mr. Speaker. For the province that we have and the distance we have, in my mind, I don't think that's enough. Is the minister ready to maybe look at that possibility of adding another aircraft? Now, the minister over the other side, Mr. Speaker, is talking about a fixed wing, but they rent that from Provincial Airways, Mr. Speaker, when usually the helicopter or their life flight can't fly, Mr. Speaker. We don't have a 24-hour committed fixed aircraft in the province. They use that when they don't have access to the other aircraft. So there's an area there where we're going to have to look at enhancing if we're going to continue on this track of relying on the paramedics of this province to give the services of an emergency room, Mr. Speaker. The other thing we need to do, and the government needs to recognize, is enhance the use of nurse practitioners. I've always called for, and I think it's important, the use of nurse practitioners, we don't use them enough, Mr. Speaker. We need to exploit nurse practitioners. We need to make sure that they're in every part of this province working and practicing to their full potential, especially in emergency rooms. One of the main problems we have, Mr. Speaker, around emergency room closures is the stress and the overworked healthcare workers in those facilities. The minister said we have doctors with busy practices that can't give that service to an emergency room to cover those hours. Part of it is because they realize if they step foot in the emergency room, they're swamped. Well, why don't we have nurse practitioners in all our emergency rooms doing triage, Mr. Speaker? I read a report recently, Mr. Speaker, that a nurse practitioner could divert about 80% of patients to go on to have to see a doctor, Mr. Speaker. Nurse practitioners are highly trained individuals who can prescribe medication, can give advice on their medical condition, and can, make those individuals not require to have to see a doctor, Mr. Speaker. Those are steps we could take right now, immediately. The minister quoted a lot of figures on equipment that they built, Mr. Speaker, to try to address some of the problems we see in our hospitals and in our emergency rooms. I know for a fact I have a beautiful facility out in Sackville. I've always advocated that the Cobequid Centre there has a great group of professionals who work there, but one of the criticisms I have is that here we have an emergency room that provides great service that closes down at 10 o'clock at night. There's an example of potentially taking some of the burden, some of the pressure off the surrounding areas, the surrounding emergency room, from Colchester Regional down to the Windsor Hospital, Mr. Speaker. Cobequid could play an important role there. And I know for a fact today, in that facility in Sackville, there's medical equipment worth over $300,000, state-of-the-art equipment that could start addressing some of the problems and wait times we see in colorectal screening, Mr. Speaker, that hasn't been used. It's been sitting in a box since January, Mr. Speaker. $300,000 worth of equipment. What could we do with that kind of money? We could hire a heck of a lot more nurse practitioners in the province. Not to say that we don't need that equipment, but if the government's committed to buying and purchasing that equipment, they should make sure that it's up and running as quickly as they can, not almost a year later. And I don't even know if it's going to be used to the full potential come January, Mr. Speaker. And I know I'll have a debate with the minister on a further occasion on that area, Mr. Speaker. But the nurse practitioners is an important area that we need to concentrate, and the government needs to recognize that they can play an important role. And not only them, other healthcare providers. There's a great example down in Digby where nurse practitioners and paramedics have worked together with an expanded scope of practice to deliver healthcare service to the people of that area, Mr. Speaker. And the reviews are great. The public at first didn't know if that was going to meet their needs, but it has. Reports have said that it's meeting their needs. The requirements for emergency room visits have dropped, and I think that is an area where we need to exploit, just like we need to exploit nurse practitioners, Mr. Speaker. We need to do that throughout the province. So I think if the government was genuine on improving emergency room closures in this province, then we would be debating it and we'd be coming forward with solid solutions, Mr. Speaker, not just in a throw-in speech, but solid solutions so that Nova Scotia can see there's a change and that the government's there to listen to their problems, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. The time allotted to the adjournment debate has expired. The host shall rise and sit again tomorrow at 2 o'clock.